Good morning. So today we're going to be looking at solving systems of equations, just like we were last week, but this time doing a different method, which is called substitution. So what I want you to think about is that equation that I had you graph, where you couldn't find exactly the point where they were crossing. You had to graph 4x plus 2y, 4x plus 2, and negative 2x minus 3. And you saw that they crossed at a place that wasn't an exact intersection. So it made it very difficult to determine the exact point, which is the solution. So what I want you to think about today is, how else could we find that intersection point? So the process that allows us to find that intersection point is called substitution. And I want to remind you what substitution is before we get started. So if I asked you to evaluate 2x plus 3 if x equals 4, we would substitute in 4 instead of x, and then we can solve because 4 and x are equivalent. So that'd be 2 times 4 plus 3, which is 8, plus 3, which is 11. So we just simply substituted in something that it was equivalent to so that we could solve it. So let's take that same problem that we had from the beginning that we were able to graph to solve, and let's do substitution. So this first equation says y equals 4x plus 2, and the second one says y equals negative 2x minus 3. Now what we notice is both of these are equal to y. Okay, so if this is equal to y, that means that I can plug in this instead of a y, because they're equivalent. So I'm simply going to move the 4x plus 2 in instead of y. And this process is called substitution. So now that I have substituted, I've changed the y for something that it's equivalent to, I have an equation that is missing a y, which makes it way easier for me to solve. I can figure out what x equals. Okay, since our equation now only has one variable, we can solve by finding out what x is. So simply, I'm just going to rewrite it real quick. 4x plus 2 equals negative 2x minus 3. I need to get the variables all on the same side. That gives me 6x plus 2 equals negative 3. And solve for x. So 6x equals negative 5. Divide both sides by 6. X equals negative 5. 6 cannot be simplified. Let me go through and check my math because that's an ugly fraction. Did I do everything correctly? Looks like it. So yes, my x value is an ugly fraction. So if I go back to my graph and I think about the x of being negative 5, 6, does that make sense here? And I can see that it does, because if you look, we skipped by 1. Every 2 blocks was equal to 1. So in this x value here, that could be negative 5, 6, less than negative 1. So now that I have found x, my next step is to find y. Because recall that the solution to a system of equations is the intersection of the two lines, the ordered pair. So we have x, but we need to find y. We found out that x was negative 5, 6. Okay, so what we can do is we can pick your favorite equation, this one or this one, these are the original equations, and solve for y. So most people probably choose the first one because it doesn't have any negatives. So we can choose the first one. Y equals 4. We found x was negative 5, 6 plus 2. And so now when we simplify this, we're going to find out what y equals. Now you can use your calculator to do those ugly fraction problems. It's going to give us negative 10 thirds plus 2, which will give us negative 4 thirds. Now again, I can try to see if this makes sense. That's a y value of negative 4/3. So if I go back and look at my graph, we're going down to negative 4/3. So this right here is negative 1, so that's a little bit below negative 1, negative 4/3, that would make sense. So my final answer is the x, comma, the y. Now, you wouldn't have to graph it and use substitution to find this answer. Most people would choose one or the other. Let's do another example. Here I have y equals negative 4x plus 12 and 2x plus y equals 2. So in the first equation, it says that negative 4x plus 12 is the same thing as y. So I can plug that whole thing in instead of y. Okay, so that means I'm going to have 2x plus, what is y? It's all of this, negative 4x plus 12, and then continuing this equation equals 2. So I've used the first equation and plugged in what y was equal to in the second equation. Alright, so now we need to solve for x. So I can combine like terms. That'll give me negative 2x plus 12 equals 2. I can subtract 12 from both sides. That gives me negative 2x equals negative 10. Divide both sides by negative 2, and we get x equals positive 5. So now that I have x, I just need to find y. So pick which equation you want, the first one or the second one, whichever one you think is prettier. I bet most of you will choose the second one because it's got smaller numbers. So 2 times x, which is 5, plus y equals 2. So that gives me 10. Subtract 10 from both sides, and we find out that y equals negative 8. So my final answer is 5, comma, negative 8. Make sure you always write your final answer as an ordered pair, x, comma, y. Let's do another one. Okay, this one is a little bit trickier. Why? Because you don't have any variables isolated. Neither equation has a variable all by itself on one side of the equal sign. So the first thing we want to do is get a variable all by itself. The easier one would probably be this first equation here because the x is almost alone. So to get the x alone, all I would have to do is add 2y to both sides. So now I have the x alone as negative 3 plus 2y. So now I can substitute this for x in the second equation. So it's going to give me 3, whatever x is, negative 3 plus 2y. Notice I put that all in parentheses because we're going to have to distribute that 3 and continue writing that equation, plus 5y equals 24. So there's a lot more math to do in this one. We got to distribute first. That gives us negative 9 plus 6y plus 5y equals 24. Combine like terms. Negative 9 plus 11y equals 24. Add 9 to both sides. And that gives us 11y equals 33. Divide both sides by 11. And y equals 3. Alright, so we know what y is. Now we have to figure out what x is. Which equation makes you happier? Most people are probably going to say the first one. So we're going to do x minus 2y, which is 3, equals negative 3. So I can do a little math there. That gives me x minus 6 equals negative 3. Add 6 to both sides. So x equals 3. Final answer, x comma y, 3 comma 3. Now some of you might be thinking, how can I check to make sure my answer is correct? Well, it's really easy. Take the other equation that you didn't use to find your second variable and plug them in. So 3 times 3 plus 5 times 3 should equal 24. If it doesn't, you made a mistake. So that's 9 plus 15, and that does equal 24, so we know our final answer is correct, 3, 3. All right, so your homework tonight, 3 quick problems. We're doing the odds. I even crossed out the evens for you so you don't screw up. And should be pretty easy, guys. Good luck.